Welcome to America's Fractured Politics, the podcast for people who still believe facts matter, who believe democracy isn't just a slogan, and that real policy, honest, ambitious, rooted in people's lives, can still change this country for the better. I'm Mark Mansour. I'm an attorney in Washington, D.C., and a lifelong Democratic activist. I've spent decades working at the intersection of law, policy, and power, and I've seen firsthand how decisions made behind closed doors shape the lives of people who never get a seat at the table. Twice a week, we push past the headlines and the noise to talk about what actually matters. Not the sound bites, not the theatrics, but the substance. Let's start with the obvious. The 2026 midterms aren't just another election. This isn't just a fight over who gets to control the House or Senate. This is a test of whether American democracy, real democracy, can still function under the weight of everything it's been forced to carry. And I know we say that every 2 years, the most important election of our lifetime. But this time, it isn't a marketing line. It's the plain truth. Because this time, the question isn't just whether we win or lose a few seats. The question is whether the public still believes this system can work for them at all. This is a referendum not just on governance, but on hope. On whether people still believe they have power. Whether they feel heard, seen, protected. The threats to our democracy are real. We've all seen them: election denialism, voter suppression, the constant drumbeat of authoritarian rhetoric coming from Republican leaders at every level of government. But there's another threat, quieter, maybe just as dangerous, and that's despair. It's the creeping sense that government is broken beyond repair, that it's all theater, that no matter who's in charge, nothing changes for working people. That's what keeps me up at night. Not just the damage done by bad actors, but the slow unraveling of public belief in the very idea that government can do good, that democracy can deliver. And let's not kid ourselves. That despair didn't come out of nowhere. It's been building for decades. Through recessions and recoveries that never reached the middle class. Through tax cuts for the rich, corporate bailouts, crumbling schools, and rising rents. Through an endless cycle of politicians making promises and then backing off when the donors get nervous or the polls get tight. And yes, far too often that includes Democrats. For all the ways the Republican Party has embraced authoritarianism, we have to be honest about our own party's failures. We've protected the wealthy while claiming to speak for the working class. We've taken corporate PAC money while promising structural change. And we've allowed a generation of consultants to flatten our message into meaningless mush. That same consultant class has kept Democrats stuck in a loop of risk aversion and poll-tested cowardice. It's the reason we spend more time defending the status quo than imagining a better future. It's the reason why, in the face of rising fascism, we're still being told to tone it down and meet voters in the middle. But that middle, it shifted, and people are done waiting. We need new leaders, younger leaders, bolder leaders, people who don't owe their careers to donors and lobbyists, people who don't come from the same elite pipelines that have produced generation after generation of cautious centrists. We need to stop pretending that 80-year-old career politicians are the only ones capable of leading us through this crisis. Respect their service? Sure. But we need leadership that reflects the urgency of now, not the political calculations of the 1990s. And that means changing how we fund campaigns. Because if the Democratic Party is ever going to deliver real change, we have to cut the lifeline of corporate contributions once and for all. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve Goldman Sachs and the working poor at the same time. You cannot take fossil fuel money and talk seriously about climate change. Until the Democratic Party breaks free of corporate cash, our promises will always ring hollow. This moment demands more than symbolic gestures. It demands structural change, inside our party as well as in the country. We need to build a new bench of leaders, train them, elevate them, not because they're perfect, but because they're not owned. Because they're driven by values, not polling memos. We need to stop running campaigns designed by the same overpaid consultants who lost the last election and are somehow still calling the shots. We don't need more slogans. We need a message, a vision, a plan. If Democrats want to reclaim a governing majority in 2026, they need to offer something real, something bold, something that speaks directly to the pain, anxiety, and exhaustion so many Americans are living with right now. And that starts, let's be honest, with the economy. Not the stock market, not GDP growth, but the economy as people experience it in their daily lives. If you can't afford rent, or childcare, or an ambulance ride, you don't care what the Dow is doing. If you've gone a decade without a raise, or had to take on 2 jobs just to break even, you're not impressed by charts showing steady economic growth. People don't live in the averages, they live in the margins. And for too long, those margins have been getting thinner and more brutal. Let's talk about what people actually want. They want stability. They want dignity. They want to know they can go to the doctor without getting a bill that sends them into debt. They want to know they can afford a place to live, not live with 4 roommates into their 30s. They want a job that pays the bills and leaves enough at the end of the month to breathe. And here's the thing. We can give them that. Not someday, now. But we have to govern like we mean it. Raise the minimum wage. Pass the PRO Act so people can actually organize without getting fired. Make child care affordable. Hell, make it universal. And then go further. Build public housing. Not just a few thousand units here and there. Millions. Redesign our tax system so billionaires don't pay a lower effective rate than nurses. End the carried interest loophole. Tax wealth, not just income. Wealth. Use that revenue to do something we haven't seen in decades. Invest in people. Build public goods with the urgency and scale we once brought to the moon landing. Treat the future like it's worth building. Let's talk about healthcare. Because if there's any policy space where the difference between Republicans and Democrats is not just wide, but morally staggering, it's this one. We live in a country where people die rationing insulin, where a routine ambulance ride can cost more than a month's rent, where patients are forced to choose between skipping chemo or declaring bankruptcy. Republicans call that freedom. Freedom to die broke, I suppose. Democrats need to call it what it is, a national disgrace. Let Medicare negotiate drug prices, for real. Cap out-of-pocket costs across the board. Protect the ACA, but don't stop there. Offer a strong public option. Lay the groundwork for universal coverage, not as a fantasy, but as a basic expectation in a civilized country. We don't need to ask whether we can afford it. We already spend more on health care per capita than any other country in the world. What we can't afford is the status quo. Let's talk about reproductive rights. Since the Supreme Court gutted Roe v. Wade, we've entered an era of open hostility toward bodily autonomy. Republican-led states have passed bans so extreme they don't even have exceptions for rape or incest. Doctors are being prosecuted. Women are being denied care. And make no mistake, the right isn't stopping at abortion. They're going after contraception, IVF, even the right to access health information online. Democrats must meet this moment with unapologetic clarity. Codify Roe at the federal level. Protect access to abortion pills and contraception. Expand access to clinics, not just defend what's left. Say it plainly. If Republicans are fighting to control your body, we're fighting to protect your freedom. Period. Now let's shift to the planet. Because climate change isn't coming. It's here. We've got hurricanes where they didn't used to land. We've got wildfires lighting up whole towns. We've got 100-year floods happening every 5 years. And we've got a Republican Party still talking about clean coal. Here's the truth. We can solve this. We have the technology. What we need is political will. The Inflation Reduction Act was a start, but it can't be the finish line. We need to invest in grid modernization, in battery storage, in clean steel, in heat pumps, in jobs. Not just any jobs, but good union jobs in solar, wind, and electric vehicle manufacturing. We need a climate corps, a New Deal-scale mobilization to retrofit buildings, clean up water systems, and help communities adapt to the changes we're already seeing. And we need to stop subsidizing fossil fuel companies with taxpayer money while they poison our air and our water. This isn't just about the environment, it's about justice. Because the neighborhoods that are hottest in the summer, the ones with the worst asthma rates, the ones that flood first, those are almost always Black, brown, and poor communities. Climate justice is racial justice is economic justice, and we need to say that out loud. Let's move to another uniquely American crisis: gun violence. We've got more guns than people in this country, and more mass shootings than days in the year. Kids are doing active shooter drills in first grade. Parents are afraid to drop their children off at school. People are being murdered in grocery stores, churches, synagogues, movie theaters. And what's the Republican response? Thoughts and prayers. Enough. Democrats need to stop being tentative on this issue. The public is with us. Even gun owners support universal background checks. They support red flag laws. They support banning military-style assault weapons. So pass them, run on them, enforce them. No more excuses. We regulate cars. We regulate food. We can regulate deadly weapons. Let's stop treating this like a culture war and start treating it like the public health crisis it is. Now let's talk about the foundation that holds all of this together: democracy itself. Because without the right to vote, none of the rest of this matters. We are living in a moment of democratic backsliding, and that's not hyperbole. That's the conclusion of political scientists, international watchdogs, and anyone with a working pair of eyes. We've got gerrymandered districts so absurd they look like they were drawn by a 5-year-old. We've got voter roll purges, polling place closures, and ID laws designed to disenfranchise people of color. And we've got a president who incited an insurrection and is still being treated like a legitimate figure by one of our two major parties. It's disgusting, it's unconscionable, it's immoral. Democrats cannot meet this threat with caution. We need to meet it with conviction. Restore the Voting Rights Act, pass the John Lewis Act, end partisan gerrymandering, make Election Day a national holiday, guarantee early voting, mail-in ballots, and access for people with disabilities, protect election officials, protect poll workers, and make clear that anyone, whether a candidate or a Capitol rioter, who tries to overturn an election will be held accountable. This is not optional. This is the baseline for a functioning democracy. But now we come to the part that makes or breaks all of this. Because none of this matters, none of it, if people don't hear it, if they don't feel it, if they don't believe it. Let's be blunt. Republicans have a propaganda machine. Fox News, AM talk radio, YouTube influencers, TikTok disinformation. They don't just tell people what to think. They tell people how to feel, who to fear, who to blame, who to hate. And Democrats, too often we respond, we rebut, we explain. We show up late to a gunfight with a policy white paper. That's not going to cut it. We need to go on offense. We need to say clearly, proudly, relentlessly what we stand for. We are the party of freedom. Freedom to vote. Freedom to make your own health decisions. Freedom to breathe clean air. Freedom to raise your family in dignity. When they talk about banning books, we talk about raising wages. When they criminalize care, we expand it. When they peddle fear, we offer belonging. And here's the key. We need to tell stories, not just cite stats, not just list accomplishments, but tell human, real stories. Talk about the mom who can finally afford insulin, the kid who doesn't have to sleep in a car anymore, the veteran who got mental health care through the VA and is now mentoring others. People don't remember facts. They remember stories. They remember how you made them feel. So we need to feel more, not performatively, but authentically. We also need messengers who look and sound like the country we're trying to serve. Not just elected officials in suits, but nurses, teachers, barbers, pastors, veterans, community organizers. We need to show up in spaces that aren't traditionally political: barbershops, bodegas, farmers markets. We need to be there year-round, not just in October before an election. We need to build media, not just rent it. Fund progressive outlets. Train young communicators. Support content creators who can reach people where they are. TikTok isn't a distraction. It's a battlefield. The right built their media machine over 40 years. We won't counter it in 4 months. But we can start now and keep building. This is movement work. It's infrastructure. It's narrative power. And it's how we win long term. Let me end with this. We are not in ordinary political times, and these are not ordinary political stakes. We're living through a moment when the future is up for grabs. Not just the next 2 years, not just who controls Congress, but whether people still believe democracy is worth fighting for. This isn't just a fight about programs or tax policy. This is a fight about dignity, about whether people matter, about whether government works, about whether it's just a rigged game for the wealthy and well-connected. And if Democrats want to lead, if we want to inspire, if we want to actually earn the trust of the people we claim to represent, then we have to govern like we mean it. We can't just be the party of resistance. We have to be the party of renewal. That means bold ideas. That means clear priorities. That means standing with working people, not in campaign ads, but in legislation. We need to replace fear with purpose, scarcity with vision, apathy with energy, and we need to remember we've done this before. We built the New Deal during the Great Depression. We passed civil rights legislation in the face of brutal opposition. We created Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, not when times were easy, but when the fight was hard. What we're facing now is no harder than what previous generations faced. What matters is whether we meet it with the same courage. Courage to be clear, courage to be bold, courage to put the people first and mean it. So in 2026, let's not ask what's safe. Let's ask what's right. Let's not try to split the difference. Let's try to solve the damn problem. We've got the policy, we've got the momentum, we've got the truth. What we need now is unity, urgency, and yes, substance. Because that's what wins, not spin, not fear, not triangulation. Substance wins, substance delivers, substance lasts. Thanks for listening to America's Fractured Politics. I'm Mark Mansour. Stay informed, stay engaged, and never, ever lose hope. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and pass it along.